to these examples. What do you think? Shall we tell some stories today?
Absolutely. Let's just make it a bit more realistic. Let's bring it to real life examples so that some other people be able to relate to them. Also, if case they want to also pitch in their own stories, the chat is always available. They can drop something in the chat and we'll be able to see it and respond to it. No problem. And also, you can also get to contact us on your Shake Bansko. So we're looking forward to that also contact. So yes, let's get into it.
Yeah.
So
So
we have a
yeah, we prepared the pie chart with the answers that we have been giving over the past three lives, and then we'll just. So you want to tell a story?
absolutely. In fact, just to start off by the very first stream,
Mm,
whereby we're able to touch on what is the right definition of trauma. That was the question. What is
mm,
the right definition of trauma? And we
mm,
also got to now touch on that question of that question in itself was phrased not the very best way. We got to understand that, first of all, as you can see, trauma is a present state in the body.
right.
Also, it's a present state that should last around 6 months. So one thing I just want to touch on is a friend of mine, and actually no friend of mine. Let's start with myself. That time when
Mm,
I experienced an accident,
mm,
uh, accidental where I experienced a tire burst traveling across the country, and I was very traumatized. I would say fearful of traveling across the country, and it took me about 1.5 years to really overcome that. So I would
I,
say that is in and
I
of
remember you
itself.
shared this story with me. I think
Yeah,
you had told me that you had developed a kind of a fear of going out of the city, right? Out of
yes,
the city boundary. So you had
yeah,
made this very strong association. We had talked about associations, right? You had made
yeah,
this very strong association between this accident, this very dangerous situation, and being
exactly.
outside of the city boundary, right? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. In
And
fact,
that
just
lasted for a year and a half, you said?
it is. It is.
So that's more than 6 months, isn't it?
That is more than 6 months. I
Right.
think I did touch on that. Also, maybe just an addition to that, another experience, a short one, is I learned how to swim much later than I extended to. Because the first time I tried to swim, I felt like I got a drowning accident, a drowning experience.
All
And it
right.
shocked me. And I was like, okay, I don't need to learn how to do this. So it took me, even though I was in a school that had a swimming pool, it took me easily, yeah, almost a year to get back in that pool again, even though it was always there every day. So that's also another situation that I went through,
Yeah.
just from
So
that present.
both of those, what kind of traumas are they, Rene? Are they shock or developmental traumas?
They were the situation in and of itself was a shock for me. Where the
Exactly.
experiencing, yes, the,
Yeah,
the the feeling of drowning, the experience in that vehicle when that accident was happening, that was a shock.
absolutely. It's a
Yeah,
one event. It happened one time, and it was
yes,
very strong at the beginning, and then it stayed in your body for 1.5 year, for 1 year, right? Like the
yeah,
stress, because
yeah,
trauma in the end is just a stress state, isn't it? Like your brain is hyperactive, hyper alert, right? It stays locked into that. Hmm. Great examples. Love them. Beautiful. And
absolutely.
what about what do you think? Was it a classical or non-classical um, type of trauma?
I
Shock.
think it was. I think I think it was a classical trauma, because it's something that is not particularly unconventional.
Mm,
Its experience is it could experience in different phenomena, but almost the same incidences. Whether
yeah, a car
you know,
accident, generally
yes,
speaking, would be a
yeah,
shock. Absolutely. And experience of drowning.
yeah,
I think
absolutely,
among children of a certain age group, drowning is one of the top mortality reasons. So it's quite a common experience actually. My little sister died to drowning as well. So I myself experienced a shock of that kind. So yeah, there you go. Even between me and you, two random people meeting, we have this common experience. So definitely something rather classical. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. And actually, maybe can we touch on the, whether the trauma causes memory loss?
Mm,
How we touched on it really deals with a split in the psyche, right?
yeah,
When brains end, it can cause someone to be sleep deprived.
yeah.
So I actually have a short story for that,
Uh-huh.
whereby absolutely I got to deal with a friend who was in an abusive relationship, right? And during that time that they were trying to get away, and it took them almost 7 times to leave their abuser. They were always going, coming back, going, coming back. And when they were asked about that relationship afterwards, it's like they say, well, he was just a normal guy. But when they explained what this person was doing, we all know this is not normal. This is an abuser. So this is a friend of mine, someone I know, had this experience, and I realized this has definitely affected them, and also their productivity at work, because clearly that shows some sleep deprivation, because even in their face, you notice they started having eye bags. So that was the sleep deprivation effects.
Right.
How does that
Yes.
sound to you?
Wow. Yeah. What a powerful example. So trauma lives in the body, right, Rene?
Yeah.
The face is part of the body, and it's a very, very expressive part of the body. Um, but so are is the rest of the body, like we may tense up the shoulders, or we may get like aches in the joints, or even when I was younger, I used to get my knee completely locked in a 90-degree position, and I couldn't get it out anymore. It was like paralyzed, and it was just psychosomatic. So trauma lives in the body, and it manifests in the body, and the eye bags, and probably a kind of an expression of tension on the face is can be quite a classical expression of trauma. Um, and also, so that definitely there an expression in the body. And also, what I'm hearing is that the coming back for 7 times, that must imply some level of denial
Mm,
on the level of the abuse, right? On the level of the pain that is being experienced. And when there is that kind of repetitive behavior, it's seen as chronic in my field. It's a chronic type of behavior. And so we immediately know that the brain structure, the relational brain structures in this person that were formed in their childhood mirror the state of abuse that this person is going through. So there is almost no way that someone who hasn't gone through that as a child would ever be able to accept not even once, but twice or 3 times the same kind of abuse. Okay.
mm,
So the only reason why we come back to that is because of this trauma bonding mechanism that we had explained last time, whereby there is an unconscious familiarity with what is going on. And so the brain is saying, well, this is home.
mm,
I'm being abused. I don't like it, but two things. One, I know I will survive it because I survived it as a child, right? And two, this is very familiar. This is very okay. This is kind of normal, right?
mm.
I'm almost sure that your friend would probably reason. Well, actually, you just said, right? She would reason
Yeah.
that, oh, this is a normal person, right?
Yeah.
So this sense of normality is because when we experience these things at very critical stages of our development, between 0 and 3, and 3 and 6, and 6 and 12, the neurons in our brains connect with one another in such way as to see the world that we are experiencing as normal. So I
Yeah.
don't know what happened to your friend when they were a child, but whatever level of violence they were going through, their brain normalized that.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned trauma bonds, because there's actually a former colleague I worked with, and we were just having a discussion, and she confided, not even, yeah, she just mentioned that she finds it as a deal breaker if the person isn't aggressive. And she mentioned a certain colleague that he's too passive. He's not the kind who will hit me if I did something wrong. And the fact that he is not able to do that, she cannot even consider him to date, or even for a relationship. And I found that statement crazy, that she would say because he doesn't show signs of aggressiveness to that point,
Ah,
she didn't feel that he qualifies as a partner to her. So that was a
mm,
qualification for her, that you have to show that kind of aggression, that in case I go out of line, I need to know that you can hit me for me to come back in
yeah.
line. And if you don't have that quality and capability, I don't
Yes.
see you as a worthy
Yeah.
mate.
So I guess you're just backing up what I was saying before with another example. We are a bit out of the trauma field landscape here. We don't necessarily need to have trauma to say that, but
Yeah,
there is this sense that whatever we experience with our families in childhood is so normalized, right? To
yeah,
you, that idea of, oh, if my partner is not capable of hitting me, um, I'm not. It's not gonna qualify to be with me. It's completely foreign, isn't it, to you? But to this person, it's the opposite. It's normal that the other person should be able to hit me so that he keeps me in line with myself or something, right?
yeah,
So that is almost, we cannot confirm, of course, but that is almost certainly an indication that perhaps the father or the mother or both parents were very authoritative.
yeah.
So there is a difference between, parents who are authoritative, sorry, authoritarian rather, or authoritative and authoritarian, two different things. So there was an authoritarian parent there, and that becomes normal. Yeah, beautiful example again. Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Rene. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shows so much how, also we can just touch on the like we mentioned, the classical and the non-classical. So maybe in case you have something short to say, or maybe on to touch up on the non-classical, in case you have, because you have some time.
Yeah, the non-classical are typically trauma states that most people ignore. For example, rape in a man. Um, Most people ignore and want to ignore that sexual abuse happens to males as well.
Yeah,
And also, most people want to ignore that sexual abuse often happens within the family system rather than outside. So the typical, in this case, there is a misalignment between what we know in our field of psychology with research and what pop psychology believes. Right? Pop psychology believes that all rapes are basically the result, or most rapes are the result of a man attacking a woman in a dark alley of the city, right? And that's actually absolutely not true. Those things do happen, but most sexual abuses happen actually in the hands of men towards women, yes, but it's not exclusive. Also, women towards men, so therefore, female adults towards men. Uh, but it's easy for us to say it's a classical trauma when we think of an example of a woman having been abused by a man, but we don't think of it as classical when we think of the gender opposite. So there, I would have to say we start with a non-classical idea, but we should really bring it into domain of the classical. It is a classical case of abuse, and therefore most often of trauma when a female adult sexually abuses a man. Um, so that's one thing that comes to mind for me. And also, other types of non-classical um, are typically things that happen again in the context of very intimate relationships, but more in the form of what is not done rather than what is done. remember I was talking about um, neglect.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I have an alarm ringing. Just a second.
Okay, no problem. Um, so
Um,
guys,
yeah, I was talking the other time. I was talking about neglect, and so the things that are not done to a child. For example, children that do not receive appropriate emotional attention. Right. These things are very difficult to convey because again the brain has normalized that notion of absence. So when I enter a new relationship, if my partner is not giving me their attention, to me, an appropriate amount of attention, to me that's just completely normal. So it's very difficult to verbalize that. It's very difficult to talk about. And so typically it will be hidden from ourselves, it will be hidden from our friends, it will be hidden from our partner, it will be hidden from our family, and therefore it will be hidden from society in general. So whatever is much more difficult for society to recognize, we would classify that as non-classical forms of trauma.
thank you so much for that explanation, because I really needed that explanation to set up another anecdote I had for the non-classical. Because there's a friend of mine who, and she comes from a very well-off background. However, she said that because her father was so much of a workaholic, the neglect you're just saying, his intimacy to her was sending her money. So he was traveling around, but he was sending her money, but he never gave her the presents that she wanted. So even in relationships, she expects the man, she doesn't even want close proximity relationship. She is
Um,
okay. She even prefers long distance relationship, whereby you can
Beautiful
stay wherever
example.
you are, I stay wherever I am, but you show your intimacy by providing for my needs. So
Uh,
she is even repelled by close proximity relationship. That why am I seeing you every day? Because I'm not used to that. My father was a workaholic. He was traveling all around, but he just supported. Does that also count as a non-classical? Because it would also difficult for me to comprehend.
yeah, there is definitely a form of neglect there on the parental side, and therefore again a normalization of that relational dynamic that is not healthy, and becomes very unhealthy in the situation of an intimate couple that wants to look forward to build a family together, or just to be of support to one another. So yeah, there is definitely a relationship there. Um, in this case, we talk of a hypo alertness rather than hyper alertness. So
Yeah,
we will touch base on the hypo states when we will talk about depression and trauma.
yeah,
Um, so the brain can also numb itself to deal with the hyperactivation of of the limbic system. So let's say you went through that accident that you were talking about, either the drowning one or even the car accident, and then for that all year and a half, you although you are an extrovert, you stayed at home much more than you would normally ever stay at home. And that's because your brain is trying to dampen every possible emotion that you can feel in order to maintain a certain kind of boundary around the experience of anxiety. So yes, a good example. There is definitely something there. Of course, as a counselor, as a therapist, I can never make conclusive remarks until I actually meet the person and until I talk in depth about those particular experiences and then make the links, right? So, uh, in these live sessions, when we talk about these examples, I'm always going to be tentative about what I'm saying, not because I'm not confident about what I'm saying, but because there is a process, almost a scientific process that we go through before we are able to make conclusive remarks about any example. Does that make sense to you, Rene?
yeah. That does make sense because it's also very considerate. And thank you for engaging all these anecdotes. We have come to the close of our 20 minutes. I really enjoyed in involving these anecdotes with you. Did you enjoy it, Nicholas?
Oh, very, very, very much. I look forward to the next ones. Your stories are just fascinating and so on point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas. Guys, until next time, we will keep in touch. For those who have not subscribed, we really, really encourage you to subscribe so that you'll be notified the next time we are online. And until next week, we shall connect soon. Bye, guys.